The Renaissance had one very specific idea about women and death, and it painted that idea over and over for 200 years and called it art. Here is the idea that a woman's beauty is the thing that invites her own destruction, that vanity is a kind of suicide, that if you're young and you're beautiful and you know it, death is already behind you and you've brought him there yourself. Hans Baldung Green painted this in 1510, 3 Ages of Woman and Death, Kunsthistorisches Museum, Vienna. A young woman, nude, pale, luminous in that specific way Renaissance painters spent careers perfecting. She's looking in a mirror. Behind her, death is pulling her veil. It's grinning. And behind the rotting corpse, an old woman is screaming, trying to pull death back, failing completely. There's a child on the ground. The young woman hasn't noticed any of it. She's still looking at herself in the mirror. Baldung painted this subject obsessively. Death and the Maiden, 1517. The Ages and Death, 1544. The 7 Ages of Woman, 1544. He had a career-long fixation on the moment when female beauty encounters mortality, and in every single version, the woman is beautiful, the woman is naked, and the woman has done something to earn this. In the 1510 painting, what she's done is look at herself. That's the charge, that's the crime. She found herself beautiful, and now death has her hair. Nobody painted death seizing a man who was admiring himself. That's not in the catalogue. If the Renaissance had a different, more specific category of cruelty, it was this, the human curiosity. The person whose body differed from the norm, framed as a spectacle, circulated between courts as a form of prestige object, and then painted to document the transaction. Antonietta Gonsalves was about 15 years old when Lavinia Fontana painted her in 1594. She has hypertrichosis, the condition that causes hair to grow across the face and body, and she is dressed in the finery of a noble girl, which she was because her father Petrus Gonsalves had been educated at the French court and risen to a position of genuine standing there. She holds a piece of paper in the portrait. It's a handwritten note that explains her origins. Her father, a wild man discovered in the Canary Islands, was shipped to Henri II of France as a coronation gift in 1547. He was 10 years old. He arrived in a cage. He was fed raw meat because his captors weren't sure he was fully human. He turned out to speak, to learn Latin, to study law, eventually to teach it at the Sorbonne. He married a woman named Catherine Raffarin, who may not have known she was part of an experiment Catherine de' Medici was running to see what kind of children he would produce. Several of those children inherited his condition. After Catherine de' Medici's death in 1589, the entire family was dispersed to Italian courts as gifts. Antonietta ended up at the court of the Marchesa of Soragna. She was examined by the naturalist Ulisse Aldrovandi in Bologna in 1594, documented in his notes as a medical marvel. Then Fontana painted her. The painting is, by any measure, an act of care. Antonietta is rendered with dignity and detail, her dress exquisite, her expression composed. Fontana was one of the most technically accomplished portraitists of her generation, and she painted this child as she would have painted any noblewoman. That's part of what makes it so disturbing. The care and the exploitation are the same object. The dignity and the display are inseparable. Antonietta holds her own provenance note in her hands, the document that explains who owns her. Nobody asked Antonietta what she thought about any of this. The note she holds is not her words, it's a label. The Renaissance had one other habit that doesn't get discussed as often as it should. It painted children in ways that weren't about children. Caravaggio's Boy Bitten by a Lizard exists in 2 versions, 1594 to 95, and it's been argued over by art historians for decades. A young boy, shoulder bare, recoiling from a lizard that's bitten his finger, mouth open, expression somewhere between pain and something harder to name. The painting is technically extraordinary, the light catching the boy's skin against the dark background with that particular Caravaggian intensity that makes everything look simultaneously beautiful and slightly dangerous. The debate isn't about the lizard, it's about who the boy is. Caravaggio's early Roman period involved a documented circle of young male models, street boys, the sons of labourers and market vendors, who appear in his paintings in states of undress and vulnerability. His patron, Cardinal Francesco Maria del Monte, who housed him from 1595, had interests in young men that the historical record documents without quite prosecuting. The paintings Caravaggio made during this period are works of extraordinary beauty featuring adolescent boys in intimate, carefully lit, sometimes explicitly sensuous arrangements. Art historians describe this as Caravaggio engaging with classical ideals of youth and beauty. That reading is available. What's also available is that these were real children from poor families, in a city where poor children had very few protections from men with money and patronage, and the paintings are the record of that. The lizard in The Boy Bitten is a symbol, according to the scholarship, a warning that beauty bites back, that pleasure comes with pain. The boy recoils from the thing that hurt him. He looks genuinely surprised. That expression is what the painting is built on. Here's how the Renaissance thought about all of this officially, which is to say, how it justified what it was doing. The concept was called vanitas, the brevity of life, the foolishness of earthly pleasure, the inevitability of death. It was a genuine theological tradition, grounded in Ecclesiastes, and the painters who worked within it were not cynics producing exploitation under cover of scripture. Most of them believed it. Hans Memling's vanity panel from around 1485 shows a nude woman standing at the centre of a triptych, holding a mirror up to her own face. On her left, death dances with a scroll of warning. On her right, hell burns. She has a small dog at her feet and an expression of complete composure. She is the allegorical figure of earthly vanity herself, the sin made flesh. She is beautiful, she is naked, she is damned. The official argument was, look how brief all this is. Look how little your beauty means against eternity. Memento mori, remember that you will die. What the argument required, functionally, was female bodies. Lots of them. Naked, beautiful, accessible to the viewer's eye, framed as warnings. The theological content licensed the looking. The looking was the point, a painting about the brevity of earthly beauty that required the painter to study a young woman's body for weeks and then display the result publicly for the purchasing enjoyment of wealthy men was, in its official reading, a moral instruction. In its actual operation, it was something rather different. The Renaissance ran this argument for 200 years and got extraordinarily good at it. And then there's this. The Triumph of Death, painted by Peter Bruegel the Elder around 1562, hangs in the Prado, in Madrid, and nothing in this video or in most videos prepares you for what it actually is. It's a panorama, roughly the size of a large dining table laid flat. Every inch of it is populated. An army of skeletons moves across a blackened, burning landscape, harvesting the living. In the foreground, a skeleton on horseback leads a scythe through the crowd. In the upper left, skeletons ring the death knell bell. Skeletons carry a cartload of skulls. A starving dog nibbles at the face of a child. People are being herded into a coffin-shaped trap decorated with crosses. And in the lower right corner, a man and a woman playing music. The woman is singing from a sheet of music. The man is playing a lute. Behind them, a skeleton is playing along on a fiddle. They haven't looked up. They're still on the song. Bruegel painted every level of 16th century Flemish society in this canvas. Kings, cardinals, soldiers, peasants, lovers, merchants, children. Death comes for all of them with exactly the same indifference. The king in the lower left has his treasury spilled across the ground. Skeletons are scooping it back up. The cardinal is being helped toward his fate by a skeleton who has helpfully donned a cardinal's hat. Here's what the allegations actually are. Not that the Renaissance was dark. Every era is dark. Not that individual painters were bad people, or that individual patrons were predators, though some of them demonstrably were. The allegation is structural. It's that a civilization built an entire aesthetic tradition, centuries long and technically staggering, on a set of ideas that required the objectification of women, the display of children, the beautification of suffering, and the framing of all of it as moral instruction, that it looked at Bruegel's burning landscape and the Baldung corpse grinning over a girl's shoulder and Antonietta Gonsalves holding her own provenance note, and called all of it art, and collected it, and sold it, and hung it in palaces. Bruegel painted the whole apparatus being destroyed by the one thing it couldn't accommodate, which is death, which doesn't care what you collected or what you commissioned or how you framed the looking. The king's gold goes back in the ground. The cardinal's hat doesn't help him. The lovers with their lute are still playing, and the skeleton behind them has already joined in. The Renaissance was not beating the allegations. It was making new ones every decade, and it was doing it so beautifully that we're still looking.